Shane, our logistics guy.
Yeah.
We have the packers in because we're in the middle of a major distribution and a major deployment to Nepal. So, everybody, smile. You're going to be famous. You're all on the podcast, and there's the CEO at the background paying an interest. So that's our lovely packers packing stuff and making all this noise for our podcast in the background. But again, we're a live warehouse. We're in the middle of a big deployment. This is what's going on. So all this stuff's going to Nepal. All these boxes are now going on a charter from the UK. They're flying them to Dubai to meet up with another charter to fly it into Nepal. So we're apologising for the noise. But that was the Nepal pack going on, or one of the many Nepal packs. And we have a slide on view at the moment of Nicola in Nepal with one of our tents being used as a makeshift hospital in Nepal very shortly after the earthquake. We had some equipment left behind or in storage from when we were last there, and that was used quite quickly to help. Again, each deployment is very, very different, and our ethos is we must help the most vulnerable. And with the kit that we had there, while we were figuring out where the most vulnerable was presenting itself with the people who were being treated. So we were saving lives pretty much from almost immediately after the earthquake with the tents and boxes that we were using for the medical facilities. And now we're starting to spread out, but I'm getting ahead of myself, and there are other things afoot. So that's what's going on at the moment, or just in the recent past. So starting from the left, we've got Gaza. We're still trying to get more kit into Gaza, but it's very complicated. We'll cover that later. Bolivia, it's flooding, so we're monitoring that. Africa, Ebola, we're still monitoring that because now we might have, what happens to the orphans. What happens to people as they migrate because they've not been putting the crops down. So there could be knock-on effects in Sierra Leone that might cause displacement. Niger is ongoing. We'll talk about that later. Cameroon has just finished. It says plan there. The equipment is stuck it's delayed. The west coast of Africa, all the ports have jammed up with lots of aid going in for the Ebola and lots of other things going on. So Cameroon is going ahead, but it's in the logjam of aid and equipment trying to get into the west of Africa. Ukraine is still going on. We're still monitoring that. Turkey is one of our pipelines into Syria. We've just done a deal to do more work with some partners and a different way of getting into Syria through Turkey. Iraq, ISIL or ISIS is still causing displacement as the battle lines go backwards and forwards there. And we still have equipment in Iraq being distributed that we're monitoring, and we'd hope to send a team once we have enough people. Pakistan, that's been going on for a long while. It's just one of those places very difficult to get to, very difficult to remotely operate. I think that the equipment is already out, and we are pressing our partners for the verification that we need there, and that will keep going. It's just one of those places that nothing happens fast. Nepal, well, we all know about that, and we'll come to that later. The DPRK, or North Korea as it's known outside of there, the team have just come out from overseeing and helping distribute 800 of the Flex 3 tents that we've talked about in previous webinars, and 800 of the small green boxes accompanying that, because the Flex 3 and the stove are just too huge to get in our normal box. So we've sent smaller boxes with all of the blankets and hats, gloves, scarves, water carriers, etc. that you'd normally expect in a large box. But the tent, because it's the winterized tent, the Flex 3, still dome tent, still got ShelterBox on the side of it, but it's designed to take a stove. So as we tip into the winter, and it goes down to about -20 centigrade and below, they now have tents that can prepare them against that winter, because the ordinary ShelterBox tent and the OS tent, that's not their sphere of excellence. Where else are we? Somalia, yeah, we've got fighting displacement there. South Sudan rolls on. We're still trying to find a way into South Sudan, but we've failed at the moment, but we haven't given up just yet. Vanuatu, We'll cover that, but that's been going on for a while after the typhoon rolled through Vanuatu. That's just finished today, I think. Our last team member was out of there just yesterday/today. Malawi, which is why I missed the last webinar. We kind of ran out of people, and I went in as the in-country coordinator to sort of be in the hub in Blantyre while I think we had 3 teams at the beginning when I was out there distributing aid, but we'll talk about that later. Right, Nepal. That is our main focus at the moment. Very, very large earthquake, 7.4. And for those who haven't been forced to find out, each Richter scale is double the last one. So a 5 is double the size of a 4, and so on forth. So the 6s, they're quite big, 7.4 over double that size. And as you can see there, it's cracked roads, it's changed the shape of the landscape, it's wiped towns off the map. Conservative estimates say that over 200,000 households have been totally destroyed, with roughly the same number that have been severely damaged. So if you imagine 3 or 4 people to each, you can see there's an awful lot of people who are without shelter, without their livelihoods. Their entire lives have been turned to dust. If you look at the website, Nicola's report is where entire towns are just assorted bricks down a hillside because of the steep terrain. They're very vulnerable to earthquakes, and this one was a big one, and unfortunately it was shallow. So we're still getting our head around what we need, but what we've done already is we've embedded our volunteers with major aid agencies. Because of the overarching huge situation, we have to work in conjunction with all of the rest of the effort to make sure that we're doing the best thing. The shelter cluster has already sort of gone down the policy that if you're distributing shelter, you need to be doing distributions with food as well, because food is a desperate situation over there at the moment, and because there's so little aid compared to the size of the problem and people are getting desperate, that any distributions that don't supply food as well could end up becoming violent as people get desperate. So it has to be an overall joined up exercise, or we could just make the situation worse. Your house is gone, your family, you've got family members missing or dead, you're desperate for food, and then you get attacked by someone else who's desperate for food as well. You have made people's lives worse by trying to help them, so it has to be joined up. So we've got the International Office of Migration, ACTED, which is a French organisation, and Handicap International are doing things that we've worked with them before. We like what they do, they like what we do. We can be the shelter element of what they're trying to do, which is help as many people as possible. So we've linked up with those people. We have also sent a team up to the worst affected, which is Sindhu Palchok. I've been rehearsing that, even though you can't tell. Sindhu Palchok. And that's deep into the worst affected area. And we've got a team that's looking at what ShelterBox distributions can be done in conjunction with food distributions as well, but sort of branching out on our own as we find our feet and find out which areas are a success that we can reinforce. We've got a small amount of distributions, 45 tarpaulins, boxes of high energy biscuits, not distributed by us or supplied, but alongside with ACTED for the reasons we've already said. Shipments, we have 500 shelter kits, 500 UN tents. They have arrived already. 500 shelter kits arrived the day before yesterday, and we have got 1,736 shelter kits due to arrive in the next day. Logistics are an absolute nightmare. The runway's been damaged. It's a short runway to start with. There are only, I think, 9 parking spaces at this airport. It's like trying to have a gigantic disaster and trying to service its needs through Blackpool Airport. Not that I'm being detrimental to Blackpool Airport, but it's just not geared up for an international aid effort. They don't have the unloading gear. They don't have the ability to cope with certain types of freighter. The freighters that are flying there, they have to take spare fuel because of the congestion there. So if there's any congestion, they have got enough fuel to fly to another airport and land safely, which means that the more fuel there is on the aircraft, the less cargo they can carry. So you've got these huge planes which are turning up not to capacity because of safety reasons and because of the reasons of the damaged airport. And everyone is trying to get aid in there. In the beginning, they had a highly congested airport, and one of the big problems is that people who wanted to leave and could leave, or visitors, had nowhere to live because all of the hotels had been destroyed, or they just wanted to leave, and they were clogging up the airport just by their physical numbers. So prioritisation was given to clearing the airport of numbers, so passenger aircraft was quite rightly prioritised, because then that clears up the way for the aid to come in, which has just started to. We're also looking at ways of getting around this, possibly sending flights into India and then trucking it up across the border, up through damaged roads, with a monsoon just about to arrive, with a local population that have already started demonstrations and have been trying to stop aid convoys getting through. I mean, you can understand their desperations. If they can see the aid that's going past that can save their lives, they just have as much right to it as anyone else, and they, in their desperation, have been trying to stop the aid convoys. So there are challenges that are coming out of this that our team are trying to get around on a day-to-day basis. The customs arrangements seem to be changing every day. Nepal is just not geared up for bringing in large amounts of freight, so people are getting used to the new task in hand, the new procedures, and they change almost daily. And when loads get split, there are certain rules and regulations that means that more paperwork needs to be provided, etc., etc. I'm boring myself, but I'll move on. But logistics is an issue. But we have committed, 2,736 shelter kits. 1,352 shelter boxes are also on their way. You've just seen them being packed. Well, not all of them, but some of them. And 500 UN spec tents. And we're planning beyond that to plumb them into that logistics pipeline. Storage, again, if a lot of the buildings have been destroyed, the airport's not geared up for huge amounts of storage. So if we were to overcommit at this point, we would then have our aid with nowhere to go. You're actually blocking the airport for other aid to come through, and you could choke it up and waste donors' money paying what they call demurrament charges, which is having stuff stuck in customs. So you can't undersupply, you can't oversupply, and even the sweet spot doesn't feel like it, because you always feel like you could be doing better. But we have had independent advice from one of our tent manufacturers saying that they want to supply the people who seem to be getting the success to get the tents in there, and they were very helpful in putting us to the front of the queue of reorders, because they believe that we had one of the fastest reactions, and with our partners we seem to be being troubled to a lesser degree than other people that we're working with. So that's Nepal. We'll have a huge update for the next time, and those numbers will go up. We're prioritising shelter kits at this moment in time, because that is what was required with the partners and the shelter cluster. They've now revised that, and they want tents. They're even talking about tents that need to be winterised, even though it's just spring, because the situation that they're looking at, it's another 10-year recovery event. It's like a mini high-end. Well, it's not even no mini about it. It is of a high-end size, and unlike the Philippines, it's very, very difficult to access, and it is much poorer than the Philippines, so its recovery will be slower. So they're talking about winterized tents when it's even in spring. But the team's there. There's a myriad of challenges and problems to get round, and rest assured that people are putting their efforts into that. It's only just getting into week 2, so it's still forming whatever personality this deployment will be, and we will try and get as much aid as we can in there. And a big thank you to all our donors that have given this time, and for me, more importantly, have given before, because we don't have to apply for funding. We don't have to wait for the money to come in to do something, because our specialised equipment needs to be bought a year ago and pre-positioned. the people who've supported us in the past, they're just as valuable, if not more, than the people who've come on board now. So my thanks go to people now and people in the past who've done that, and people who are going to donate next month, hopefully, who will be helping us a year from now when something like this happens again. Right, Malawi. Malawi, again, was a big deployment. It was a once in an 80-year event for the Malawians. They describe themselves as the warm heart of Africa. Very cheerful, very, happy people. But you look at them, and that's one of the amazing things about the Malawians, is they just are so happy no matter what challenges they face. The number's quite large again, and if you're looking at the logistics issues, that kind of what conjures up the kind of problems we were facing over there is, mud roads. If you think we distributed 1,224 boxes, and a good proportion of those, the last few miles would have been on the back of a bicycle, or the tents coming literally on the back of a bicycle down a path that's been washed away. That picture on the left, I took that down in the Malanje area. And that is, I think it's Mount Malanje it's called, and that pretty much scoops all the cloud up around it, and as it goes over the top it rains, and you can see that storm starting to roll down the mountain, and all the people were literally running along the path to get their shelter to put it up before the rains came later that day. And you can see where the stream on the left hand side had swelled up during the storms and was eating into the path and was threatening to cut off that village. So we did 1,224 boxes, 650 shelter kits, nearly 1,000 lamps. Well, you can read the slide as much as I can, but 32 SRTs, 7 staff. Because we were one of the major players in Malawi, because it's landlocked, it's difficult to get to, it's problematic. There's not a lot of UN money because of the corruption issues with the government. There's not a lot of funding around there. It's a very poor country. So it's not popular among the major aid agencies to work because it's difficult. Now, carrying our original spirit along with us is because it's difficult, and because no one else is really committing a lot of help to these people. We feel, and our donors feel, that these are the people we should make an effort to go to, because it's difficult, because no one else cares, because no one else is coming to help these people. That's the place where ShelterBox flourishes. And we sent someone to engage with the cluster, which we've talked about before, and an independent observer from the UN was saying that we were one of the major players in shelter in Malawi, and very difficult to operate. Soaked up a lot of resources, but very successful deployment in the end. So that was Malawi. And remote Gaza, we briefly mentioned that. Nothing much happening more than Gaza, only that we are still trying to get more boxes into Gaza with that fluid conflict situation. And hopefully we will, because all the situations are favourable. It's just a matter of having the time and the resources to keep pushing that down that path. Cameroon, 7th of May, congestions. The team went into Cameroon and we had a very, very extensive look at the security about getting in there, because it can be quite a violent place. And the team went in there, did train the trainer in the main city with Aida, see what kind of people they were, developed a working relationship, built up trust. Very successful so far, and those 224 boxes will arrive. And if it all goes well, we'll send another team in there to see what happened to it. Probably won't actually get up to where they are because of the violence and the kidnapping risk. But we might, hopefully, my hope is we will push further into Cameroon. Pakistan, we've mentioned, nothing's changed there, but hopefully we'll have some resources to try and find out from our partners and get the required verification. DPRK, I think I've mentioned 800, it's 400 tents and 400 boxes. The team are back, they're in China on their way home, and hopefully we'll have some more pictures and a fuller report from that, but they said it was going well. Colombia, an earthquake, boxes are pre-positioned. If that earthquake continues, or any more sort of displacement from that, we will, the UNGRD will be responding, and we'll send a team to monitor that if the numbers become big enough. Iraq, winter liners and tents, they've been distributed. I want to send a team into Iraq when we've got enough people to just check what's going on, send a monitoring team. I'm going to be talking to Malcolm, who's in charge of the monitoring and evaluation department, to see what's happened to the tents before, and also encourage further distributions. Niger has been going on a while. It was flooding in the bottom left-hand corner, sort of Tabarere up that end, top left-hand corner to me and you, and Differ, which is the bottom right-hand corner. Different disasters, but one's merged into the other now. We've got word from our partners that they've distributed 200 boxes, and they want more to go out in Differ because of the violence that's moving people from Boko Haram, from Nigeria up into the Niger. And we'll get more reports off them and probably send a team if we have resources to find out and keep things on track. Monitoring. Yeah, Chile's got it's got a volcano that keeps spewing ash out. People have been moved. We have been working with Habitat for Humanity, and when or if, or hopefully not, the volcano won't develop into a major disaster. But if it does, we're poised with Habitat for Humanity. I think we're talking with them about sending shelter kits to help people rebuild from where buildings have collapsed with the ash on them, or where they're having to make temporary accommodation outside of the exclusion zone. So you might see us putting a team in there in the next week or two, depending on how that volcano goes and whether Habitat can cope with the outflux of people from that. Yemen, Somaliland, more violence unfortunately. No shelter need yet. It's a bit of a badlands out there. The picture of what's actually going inside the country is very vague, because it's kind of remote to start with, and it's kind of a very totalitarian regime, so there's not a lot of publicity coming out of there. But we continue to engage with agencies around Yemen and Somaliland and see if we can get some of our trust going, find one of our trusted partners, because again, Yemen, Somaliland in the middle of the conflict, that's just outside what we can send our people in for, but other people might have local partners and local offices that we can work with and help with them. The Philippines, we have, well, what is it? It's Friday today, so we're in that red zone, and over the weekend we are hoping against hope that Typhoon Newell will not make landfall, but it's looking very much like it will. Another hope that it might dissipate before it hits land, but we'll just have to monitor that. We have equipment in Clark, which we have paperwork issues with, but we also have paperwork in Cebu, which is one of those long islands around. It's in the 10 North line. It's that very long sliver island in the middle of those islands right there. And we have working relationships with the Philippines Air Force and the Navy to get equipment up from Cebu very, very quickly. So we'll be looking at that over the weekend, as well as trying to service Nepal and look elsewhere as well. Hopefully I can speak to you in a month and say it all fizzled out and it was just a wet bank holiday in Morecambe, but it might not. Right, coming to the video of Malawi. Although I was ICC, just because of the numbers and the location of this camp, it was quite close to where I was based, and I was with a team lead, and we went up there, and we were working with the chief and his wife of the area, and they. As usual in these kind of places, the schools become the focal point of where people sleep. They wanted to tend their crops as they're going to starve, so they would move out to where their houses used to be, and they would tend their crops, and then they would come back into the school and the churches and sleep in the schools and churches overnight. Food distributions were done at that central location to keep them in the game. So you could use the schools network and the church network and the chiefs, because it's quite tribal in some ways. Once you get outside the towns, it breaks down into villages, and then it also breaks down into tribes and chiefs, and you use them to find these people, and it's getting at the people. You know the need is out there, but if it's in individual areas and individual households, it's very difficult to find where those places are, apart from just wandering around, which isn't very efficient. So using this system, you find these hubs of information, and we were distributing shelter boxes with all the non-food items that were not needed in some tent distributions. We were also distributing shelter kits, and we were distributing, I think we had 5 shelter boxes. You'd be able to see them on the back of the truck anyway, 5 school boxes. School was in a poor state. They didn't have any radios anymore, so couldn't take part in a learning program. They had 3 boxes of chalk left, and we turned up with the school boxes. The shelter kits is what they were really excited about, because this was, I think it was probably about 3 months into the disaster, and they'd not had any aid whatsoever. The food distributions were done locally with the chief of redistribution of their assets, but they had not had any help whatsoever. Now, what happened in this video is that we had arrived in our 4-wheel drive with the truck in convoy, and another truck had broken down on that road, which was just a dirt track, so it had blocked the road. So we'd gone on ahead while the truck had negotiated its way around this broken down truck. So we got into the village. We had no idea what to expect. We knew that the distributions were going to be going on. The chief's wife and the chief had arrived earlier. We arrived about 2 minutes before the truck, and then the truck rolls in. It's not staged, and you can tell by the amateurish shooting. I'm not a camera person, but the atmosphere of the place and trying to get what this aid that you have given means to these people is very difficult. It's kind of a burden I carry back, trying to explain and pass on that burden, because I'm part of the ops team. It's what I do. The real thanks needs to go to the volunteers and the people who donate and make this happen. So when people thank me, I feel like I'm left with this thing that I don't deserve, and I need to pass it on. And the thanks that came out of the crowd spontaneously, I thought, right, I need to video this because I can't carry this. I need to pass this on to you people who made this happen. So what I'm going to do now is just play my amateurish video of what happened. And as you can see, the truck rolls in, and this happened spontaneously. And I'll just leave you to just listen to that. So I'm videoing this. There's the chief's wife on the right hand side, who kind of looked after the families and adopted people. There's the team lead on the left. And about this point I thought, okay, when do I stop? Because they're not going to stop. They're just going to keep on going. And they're going to keep singing, because it was like they had won the lottery. You know, we wanted to get on with the distributions, and this just seemed like it was never going to end. Utterly spontaneous stuff. Makes the hairs on the back of your neck go up. It certainly did to me. And there it was. I kind of stopped, and that went on for quite a while. And because they were just absolutely, made up by what you people had done. It was like each and every one of them had won the lottery. And they made us all sit down, and they offered their thanks, and people were giving speeches. It was the major event that had happened to them in their lives since the disaster. And they, what I told them is that no matter how remote that these people were, the people out in the world that they'd never met, they were thinking of them, and they wanted to make sure that they had help. And that's it. So I'm passing that thanks back to you, and that's pretty much it. So remember, alfe@shelterbox.org, and questions, points, but that's it. That's the webinar for this month, and I'll maybe see and hear you next month. Thank you very much.